What is up, guys? It is time for a little MLB Strategy Show where we will go game by game on today's main slate. No early slate talked. If you have any questions, feel free to drop in chat. We'll see if we can help you guys out. But I'm Chris Spags, joined once again for this deep journey into 12 games of Major League Baseball. My usual pal in the mornings, Greg Ehrenberg. How you doing, Greg?
Yeah, so we have an afternoon slate, but we also have the 12-game night slate. So we're going to be doing a strategy show for the night slate. If people have questions about the early slate, we could answer those also. Just kind of scheduling issues that we weren't able to do the afternoon show today. Also, we're still not totally sure what the preference would be from people watching, if they'd prefer us to do live before lock, if there's going to be afternoon games, or if people would prefer us to talk about the night slate. So just kind of trial and error on some of this stuff.
If you have any strong opinions, feel free to tweet us at Chris Spags, at Ehrenberg Dfs, or I guess at Awesemo_com too, letting people know what you want to see out there. And, you know, that's certainly helpful, but obviously we're going to be doing a little more of a shift towards MLB content with the NBA starting to slow down during the playoffs. So keep that in mind here. And it's, you know, it's not a democracy per se, but it is certainly your guys' feedback. Very much appreciated on here to hear what you guys want. So let the people know and let us know what you're trying to see for these shows. But we do have a 12-gamer today, one with one game that does not have a total right now because I think the pitching is up in the air with Miami and Colorado. But any overarching thoughts for you, Greg, before we get into this one? It does seem like another slate with weather heating up, and the pitching today, I feel like some question marks with the conversations we've had recently about spin rate.
Yeah, so this is going to be pretty big for me because I have not totally decided what I'm going to do with Garrett Cole yet today. I've been looking at a lot of his numbers during his time at Pittsburgh because I have a feeling he might revert to being the pitcher. Did you see the interview he gave yesterday?
I did. Yeah, they asked Garrett Cole if he was using spider tack, which I guess is the predominant one, and he's like, I can't answer that, but there's a lot of things we've done. I know pitchers, baseball players been doing. It was the worst non-answer that you've ever seen.
I've never seen somebody take 90 seconds to answer a yes or no question. Like, hey, like I could just ask you, did you have breakfast this morning?
Well, here's the thing about breakfast. It's been a classic part of breakfast. No, I did not have breakfast this morning.
There you go. That's the only answer. That was the most bizarre yes or no question. First, he's like, well, I don't know how to answer that. Then he's just silent for a really long time. And then he goes on this long thing about what pitchers have done in the past, what other people have told him to do. And it totally didn't address really what he was being asked about. But I mean, that is a lot to take away from an individual interview that would make me impact my overall view on him going forward. But there's no doubt that he is using some sort of substance on baseballs and has for the last couple of years. And if you look at his start against the Rays last time out, it was arguably the worst start he's had in a considerable amount of time. The spin rate was way down. He ended up giving up 5 runs in 5 innings. So, I mean, there's a lot of red flags here. He's going to be popular today. And I generally tend to just really hold hands with the fielder, go overweight on the chalk stud pitchers. I think this is a spot where not only am I going to be underweight to Garrett Cole, but I think there's going to be some merit to making some contrarian stacks of the Twins against him.
So yeah, we definitely have some question marks that we will go through here as we start in the game by game, but hit that like button if you can, guys. We appreciate that a bunch. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, and also make sure you're checking out the Awesemo podcast network at awesemo.com/podcast. If you give any of those podcasts 5 stars and a review, you'll be entered to win a free week of Awesemo Plus. And we're giving those giveaways away every single Friday. So that is really your best pathway to winning a giveaway. Obviously, we do a bunch of those on Twitter too, but lots of people enter those. The podcast review is a little bit less pertinent or popular amongst people trying to win these things. So make sure to go check out all the podcasts at awesemo.com/podcast and leave 5 stars and a review with your Twitter username or your email address entered in there so you can enter to win that free week of Awesemo Plus. And also make sure to use the promo code MLB Strategy Show at awesemo.com/join. We're going to talk about a lot of data today. And of course, the Top Stacks tool is our free premium tool of the day. If you want to get the data, including player projections, ownership projections, Top Stacks tool, top pitchers tool, the boom bust tool for NBA, you can do all that at awesemo.com/join by using the promo code MLB Strategy Show to save 15% off your first week. Let's get into our first game. We got Atlanta, 4.1 implied runs going against Zach Eflin. Zach Eflin, solid results-wise on the year, 3.3 xFIP, 24.5% K rates, also an improvement for him from 21.7% since 2019, giving up a little more in the way of batting average than you'd like to see, but still kind of a shockingly low 1.2 whip for a guy who's given up a 270 batting average. Zach Eflin not walking a lot of guys, so I guess inhibiting his potential risk there for his approach with his walk rate so far this year. But Eflin on the slate, Greg, 20% ownership feels a bit lofty going against Atlanta. We certainly know they are capable of doing damage in pretty much any situation. 183 ISO on the year against right-hand pitching makes me feel like 20% Eflin on a slate of this size. It's not even that great of a price tag. I just don't know that I'd want to be here with the field.
No, I don't really like to make a habit of rostering starting pitchers against the Atlanta Braves unless it's, somebody like Jacob deGrom or Corbin Burns, one of the truly elite starting pitchers. And, Zach Eflin's fine. He's been a middle of the road starting pitcher, 4.1 ERA, 3.56 expected ERA. It is a little surprising to me to see that he is this popular on the slate, though. Like you said, I mean, we have him right now projected to be the fourth most rostered starting pitcher, 8,900 on DraftKings. That's also a pretty lofty salary. So there's other guys I'd rather get to. And I think that maybe I might end up getting to him anyway, just so I'm going to try to go really light on Garrett Cole, just kind of figuring out where my ownership would end up being. So Zach Eflin, I guess there's a chance he ends up in my player pool, but certainly not at the 20% the field is at.
Yeah, and I think certainly with the ownership going to Eflin, it does seem like Atlanta might be a stack worth targeting. And at a day where it's going to be 80 degrees, 70% humidity in Phillies Park, that does play better for power anyway. But Atlanta's hitters, it looks like a lot of ownership going to Freddie Freeman and Ozzie Albies on DraftKings. Not a lot going to Ronald Acuna, who is still priced very high, but certainly has been willing to pay off that price tag in more spots than not this year. But the rest of the Braves line, they look overowned according to the top stacks tool, but you do have pretty much everybody below the 2 and 3 hitters of Freeman and Albies under 1% projected ownership. So it does seem like right now, Greg, obviously the ownership's going to update throughout the day. This Atlanta stack, I think, looks pretty solid, even though they do look overowned in the top stack. So it isn't spread out in a way that is going to keep you from getting to a 3-man or a 5-man without a lot of ownership.
Yeah, one issue I have, though, here is just the pricing. If we look at we've got Ozzie Albies 6,100, Freddie Freeman 5,100. And then some of the other guys, a little bit more reasonably priced. Ozzie Albies is at 41, although he's also pretty popular. And then even some of the guys more towards the middle and end of the lineup, we have Dansby Swanson and Austin Riley both at 4,500. So just given the price tags on these guys, I don't think that they make for the best stack in terms of points per dollar perspective. We do have them for only a 1.5% chance. I think the top value stack on the slate, and the prices are just at a point where I'm likely going to be underweight to them here. If we look at Zach Eflin, even if we think that he's going over-owned as a pitcher, he's still solid enough to where I don't think this is one of the best spots on the slate.
Maybe more of a spot to take your one-offs, and I guess that could be why people are getting to Freddie Freeman and Albies, two guys who can't hit from the left side of the plate. Eflin has struggled more against lefties with a 241 ISO allowed to left-handed batters compared to 138 ISO to right-handed batters, so something to keep in mind for Atlanta as well, but not a lot of ownership going to anybody besides Freeman and Albies. On the other side, we have Tucker Davidson going for Atlanta. He's been pitching about 80 pitches per appearance so far this year. He's only faced 46 batters, though, giving up a 150 batting average, not striking out a lot of guys, the 21.7% K rate, but based on the swinging strike rate of 13% and the chase rate of 31.4%. Does seem like it could be a little bit higher for Tucker Davidson, but even on a slate like this one where the price, the salary for Tucker Davidson certainly can open some things up, I don't see a lot of use for him, Greg. And I also feel like he's been good enough at keeping the ball down. Again, limited sample size stuff, but only a 6.7% barrel ball rate, 6.4 degree launch angle. I don't mind not getting a lot of the Philly hitters or getting a lot of Tucker Davidson. I feel like both, to me, the Philly hitters look a little bit overowned, and then Davidson himself, it's like not a lot of potential.
Yeah, so we kind of like Tucker Davidson in his last start, and I think we got really lucky because his numbers are not particularly great. Although that start, he's also 4,900, so it was going to take something pretty disastrous to happen for him to not at least be decent as a 4,900 starting pitcher. But very little data on him so far this year. He's only pitched a total of 11 2/3 innings. The 2.31 ERA, that's pretty lucky. With the underlying numbers, not like they're awful with a 4.36 ERA and a 4.09 FIP, but the strikeout rate is low enough at 21.7% that he doesn't look to be somebody who's going to be a standout fantasy pitcher. His projections from Zips going forward, those don't look all that favorable either. So I agree with everything you said there. Tucker Davidson, not somebody who's going to make it into my player pool. And then at the same time, I don't think the Phillies are one of the better stacks on the slate, and the field is getting to them at a rate that I don't find them all that appealing.
Yeah, it does seem like they're not crazily overowned. It's not one of the spots where anybody's going to be 25% owned, but John Segura over 10%, Hoskins around 10%. Same thing for Harper, Real Muto over 10%. It does seem like these guys are going to be adequately represented. The guy who's not going to be owned is Odubel Herrera, and he's pretty much never owned because he doesn't have a lot of power up top, though. Does hit better than league average, a 111 WRC plus against left-hand pitching since 2019. Let's keep it going here because we've got 12 games to hit on. We got the Dodgers getting 5 implied runs going against Tyler Anderson. Tyler Anderson been improved this year, but basically improved enough to be around a league average pitcher, a 23% K rate for himself, 4.1 xFIP, 1.2 whip, nothing too impressive here. Is missing bats decently at the 12.3 percent swing strike rate, 33.5% chase rate, but is giving up a high barrel ball rate, 10.6%, launch angle 16 degrees. And that seems to me like a spot where Tyler Anderson, I do not trust at 8K at all going against the Dodgers, but B, I think the Dodgers can take him deep in this spot. Going into Pittsburgh, where it is a little more humid today, 75% humidity, 78% or 78 degrees is the weather expected by the time the pitch goes off here. Some chance of rain, but it doesn't seem like a postponement risk right now. I feel like the Dodgers bats, Greg, ones that look a little bit under owned according to the top stacks tool. And to me, you can't get that ownership product down by playing good guys here like Justin Turner or Albert Pujols. Certainly a good guy. No, a guy who's had enough power, and I think you could still take some stabs out of 3,100. Dodger stack, I think, appeals to me, but how are you feeling about them? And I guess, do you have any interest at all in Tyler Anderson?
No interest in Tyler Anderson. It's hard for me to avoid the Dodgers when you just look at some of our data, and we do have the Dodgers with the overall best odds of being the top stack on the slate. The ownership a little bit lower than expected in terms of what we have as top stack odds, but still, I mean, this is a team that's about fairly owned, and given the odds being a top stack, it's a team I think we're going to want to get to today. Tyler Anderson, he used to be a fairly heavy ground ball rate pitcher, but this year, 39.7% ground ball rate. Last year, only 28.5%. So this is a guy who's allowing the ball to be hit in the air against him more than it was in previous years. So I think that Tyler Anderson is, just fine, okay, but the Dodgers do have a really elite offense. So I'm going to be looking to stack up the Dodgers today, maybe a little bit overweight to the field, but not massively different.
And then we also got some super chats here, and I feel like we addressed this up top that we're not covering the early slate. People are talking now. It's so funny. Everybody zigs when we zag when we are told that we have to do the main slate show. But Greg, I don't know if you prepped the early slate at all, but I have a question for you that we could answer with the tools. If not, Soul Dope asking favorite pitcher and stack on the Fanduel early slate. I have not looked at it at all yet. Would be my one qualifier. But Greg, if you have, chime in with some thoughts.
Yeah, so I have built lineups for the early slate, and it's a really easy answer. It's Yu Darvish. So here, I'm just going to read you the names, and you're not even going to have to look at data for this. The pitchers today are Yu Darvish, Sean Manaea, Kyle Gibson, Jake Arrieta, Matt Peacock, and Zach Littell.
Who's Manaea going against, though?
He is going against the Diamondbacks, but he has a comparable price tag to Yu Darvish.
Okay, yeah, then I would go Yu Darvish. And Oakland does seem to be the top stack by a decent margin, too, according to the top stacks tool, and also under-owned on FanDuel. So it does seem like that would be Darvish plus Oakland seems like the obvious answers here. But yeah, I think that's anything else you want to say about the early slate? Again, we're not going to take questions about it because we didn't prep it for the show. We have to go game by game on the 12 games here. But anything else early slate you just want to say here to plant a flag?
Just I like Yu Darvish for this slate. He doesn't seem like he's going to be somebody who's too altered by the substance issues and all the stuff with spin rates and whatnot. So also compared to the other pitchers on the slate, there's not even somebody I'm really seriously considering other than Yu Darvish and Manaea. And Darvish is going to be my highest owned pitcher by a pretty wide margin.
All right, so let's get back to the main slate. We got Pittsburgh getting 4 implied runs against Tony Gonsolin, or Gonsolin rather. Gonsolin has not pitched so far this year, has had a 24.5% K rate since 2019. At 9,100, I'm not sure how you can get there at all, given I'm not sure what his pitch count will be. And this is his first appearance on the year, unless I pulled something incorrectly here. But Gonsolin in this spot, Greg, I don't see him being the most useful. And Pittsburgh, certainly never a team I'm dying to stack either, with a 1.5% chance of being a top stack. And somehow being overowned according to the top stacks tool. So this spot seems to me neither side looking the most appealing.
Yeah, and with Gonsolin, one of the issues that we've always seen with him is, there are times where often that he doesn't work very deep into games. And, that's always going to be a concern, even in a favorable matchup against the Pirates. It doesn't matter if you're only throwing 3 or 4 innings. And we haven't seen him pitch at the big league level this year. He's made 3 starts in the minor leagues. In those 3 starts, he's thrown 10 in the third innings. So we don't know how much he's stretched out in terms of a pitch count. My feeling is that it's very unlikely he works deep into the game, which just takes him totally out of consideration. Yeah,
especially at 9,100. I don't get how you're going to get people to take that stab. If you were in the 5Ks or 6Ks, maybe you're willing to take on some risk in the hopes that the pitch count's there. But yeah, I don't see how you could make him playable at all today. Next game up, we got the Mets getting 4.9 implied runs going against Matt Harvey, a revenge game for both Matt Harvey and for the Mets. In this spot, Pete Alonso, as anybody who watched the MLB shows yesterday with me and Terry in particular on the deeper dive, Pete Alonso hit another home run for me yesterday, actually a double dong yesterday, to reward my faith in him. And this spot, I think he is a guy at 11% ownership going against Matt Harvey. I think Matt Harvey's fought off some decent spots this year. And the situation, though, where it's 83 degrees in Baltimore, I guess a decent chance of rain here. So maybe watch that as well. But humidity 70%. I feel like the hitting should start to really get to Matt Harvey more. I think he's been lucky to me because of some of the cold parks to start the year. But a 296 batting average allowed on the year, 1.6 whip. I think this is going to start to run bad, Greg, in particular, in a way that it has not maybe in some of the starts Harvey's had this year. And the Mets stack, I don't know that I love the 30%-ish ownership for Lindor, but everybody else here, I feel like this Mets stack, 3-mans, 1-offs, lots of ways to attack Harvey. And I think that is one of the moves that you have to make today.
This is how bad Matt Harvey is. You just said you're surprised at as much success. He's a 6.62 ERA, and people are like, how come Harvey isn't worse? Like he stinks. He looks. Here's his last 5 seasons now. He has a 6.62 ERA this year. He had 11.57 ERA last year. The year before, he had a 7.09 ERA. 2018, he actually managed a 4.94 ERA. 2017, a 6.7 ERA. He's been so washed for so long now. He has not had a good year since 2015 at this point. We are 6 years removed from Matt Harvey being a viable major league pitcher. And I don't understand why he keeps getting chances at the big leagues. I mean, we have them as about appropriately owned in the top stacks tool right now, but I'm still apt to just go overweight to the Mets because I think Matt Harvey is so far finished that it almost defies the numbers. He's just incapable of really having, very many quality outings. His last handful of starts, last time out, he came out early, so he only pitched 3 innings, gave up 1 run. But before that, 5 runs, 6 runs, 6 runs, 7 runs, 4 runs. He's just getting shelled every time he goes out, and I don't understand why he's still in the major leagues.
Yeah, I would agree. And certainly a guy has also given up a pretty high exit velocity. 90 miles per hour is one of the higher marks on the slate. And the Mets have enough guys who can drive that ball, especially with the weather being a little warmer and the park upgrade. Playing at Baltimore, I think a lot of things are going towards the Mets. And again, just a lot of ownership going to Lindor. The rest of these guys, I'm kind of surprised to not see like a Dominic Smith over 10% ownership. And then even guys like McKinney and Pilar down at the bottom of the order, like they have enough drive, I think, to get it going against Harvey. So to me, lots of ways you could stack them up, get the ownership down. I think they are a very appealing stack today, even though they do look overowned right now in the top stack. So again, all that's going to Lindor. The other side, we have Taijuan Walker going against Baltimore. Kind of surprised to see 4.6 implied runs going against Walker, given that Walker has been fairly solid on the year. 4.2 xFIP, but 23.7% K rate. To me, these numbers seem like you could play a little bit of Taijuan Walker. I wouldn't go crazy going against Baltimore. They strike out a little bit above league average, a 24.4% K rate on the year against right-hand pitching. But Walker, to me, Greg, I feel like probably good enough to inhibit the Baltimore stack. I know you have had some success recently with the Orioles, so maybe you're a little more predisposed to go there, but I don't love Taijuan Walker, and I think he should be good enough, though, to keep Baltimore down.
Yeah, I have oddly rostered the Orioles a lot this year. And the reason actually that I think that the odds are what they are from a betting perspective is some recency bias here, because the Orioles in the last couple of games against the Mets last night, they scored 10 runs. And then against the Indians on Sunday, they scored 18 runs. So that's 28 runs over the last 2 games. And I have a feeling that has to be what's somewhat setting up what the betting lines are. And that's also influencing how people are betting this spot. So I think that the run line is probably a little bit inflated just for that reason. I have liked the Orioles probably more than most people this year, but I don't think this is the spot to get to them, especially because the field is kind of starting to get there a little bit. It doesn't seem like that much they're 2.5% owned, but some of the other slates where I've rostered the Orioles for full slates, like they've been projected for less than 1% ownership as a team. So with that in mind, it's a team that is more owned than what they have been lately. Like 2.5% ownership is more substantial when it's been for the Orioles. And the Orioles have gone against much worse starting pitchers lately. Like Taijuan Walker is much better than somebody like David Peterson, who they went up against last night. So I think this is a good spot to jump off of Baltimore.
And Mike in the chat asking, is Taijuan Walker over 10K again? No, he's in fact down on both sites. 8,600 on DK, 7,800 on Fanduel. So if that's your reservation for playing Taijuan Walker, some of the bizarre price tags he's had recently after his, I guess, decent success to start the year, he is priced a little more reasonably. So yeah, decent enough play, but not one that's not going to jump out on the other side. And I'm with you. I think the Orioles having any ownership at all seems like a spot maybe to not want to be too heavily. Next game up, we got Houston getting 4.6 implied runs against Nathan Eovaldi. Eovaldi on the year at 23.3% K rate. That's down from a 24% K rate since 2019. 3.4 xFIP is an improvement, though, and he's missing bats a little bit better. 12.3% swing strike rate compared to 11.8% since 2019. Chase rate up too. Velocity pretty much flat. He is going against a Houston team, though. Only strikes out 19% of the time against right-hand pitching. And Eovaldi, another guy I wouldn't mind taking off the board, though. 90 pitches per appearance. Maybe there's some pathway for him to be just viable enough against Houston. But at 8,300, I feel like you don't need that price tag. And the Houston stack, they do look a little bit under-owned, or actually a little bit over-owned according to the top stack tool, but not by a lot. I would say Houston stack to me appeals more given the fact they do have the park upgrade playing at Boston, Greg, but Eovaldi's good enough too, where this might be a spot where if Houston ends up over-owned on the top stack tool by lock, I don't know that you need to get to Houston a ton. And I also wouldn't trust Eovaldi, but do you feel any differently?
No, Eovaldi's pitching really well this year, but it's the matchup and the price point that's going to keep me away from him personally. But then also the ownership on Houston, that's going to have me underweight to Houston. It's not going to be an outright fade, but it's going to be a team I'm underweight to the field on. So Eovaldi this year, 3.78 ERA, 3.39 expected ERA, 2.4 FIP. The walks are way down from this year and last year. The home runs are way down. Eventually, it's going to come back up. He's not going to maintain a 3% home run to fly ball rate, but still, I mean, there's positive signs about Eovaldi that suggest that at the very least, he's not an easy matchup for hitters, and he has been at times in the past. So to me, Houston team to go underweight to, but still the good enough offense. I don't want to roster Eovaldi.
On the other side, Boston gets 5.4 implied runs against Jake Odorizzi. And Odorizzi overall has kind of fallen off a cliff this year, up to a 10% walk rate, a 1.5 whip. It's only faced 72 batters, so not the biggest sample size so far, but does seem like some things are worse. 5.6% on run rate is a pretty big jump up from 3% historically since 2019. Odorizzi, just one of those guys that I would not want to take a stab at pitcher either. $8,100 price tag, I think not enough to absorb the risk that he's just been an under league average pitcher this year, who's also an under league average strikeout guy at a 23.6% K rate this year compared to 26.2% historically. And Greg, I feel like numbers can bounce back, but I don't anticipate them necessarily bouncing back against Boston, who does strike out above league average against right-hand pitching. But I just feel like more than enough dangerous power to give me concern that Odorizzi not in play. And I feel like the Boston stack would be much more interesting to me at pretty much even ownership with their chances of being a top stack today.
Yeah, and then also injuries are a concern for Odorizzi at this point in his career. His velocity is down a mile per hour from last year. It's down 0.7 miles per hour from 2 years ago. Because of injuries, he's only pitched 29 innings across this year and last year. So that's all concern, also compounded with the velocity being a little bit down from where it was a couple of years ago, where he was actually decent. So I don't think he's going to be a guy who's a 6.16 ERA all of this year, although he did have a 6.59 ERA in his limited starts last year. But the underlying numbers are a little more favorable towards him. No reason to roster Jake Odorizzi, but once again, the Red Sox, we have Boston with a 7.1% chance of being the top stack today, and we have Boston with a 7.1% ownership share. So I think Boston is a team to get to, and I'll be right around in line with the field.
It does seem like a lot of that ownership will be going on Draftkings to Danny Santana, 28% expected ownership his way. Alex Verdugo will also be decently owned, but not quite as owned as Santana. And I think Santana's a perfectly fine play at that price tag if he is hitting leadoff going against Odorizzi, but certainly one way you can just get different there. And Santana strikes out more than enough that I think you can take him out of a lineup and just get that ownership product down by playing one of the guys towards the bottom of the order, whether it be Renfroe or even Marwin Gonzalez or Kike Hernandez. Like, I don't mind playing any of those guys. Just get different from Santana if you are full stacking Boston. Any hitters for you really jump out for the Red Sox? I do feel like Bogarts and Devers clearly going to be the stars, but they are extremely expensive today, which is probably worth pointing out too.
Yeah, I mean, JD Martinez projected for 5% ownership. I don't mind getting overweight to that number, but yet Xander Bogaerts and Rafael Devers at first glance go, 5% ownership for Bogarts, 2% for Devers. Those seem like really low numbers, but then they're 58 and 5,900. Those are kind of problematic price tags. So on one hand, I think that if you just look at the ownership, it makes sense. Like, hey, I'm going to make a 5-man Red Sox stack that doesn't include Danny Santana. And then you start to look at the price and you go, well, it's kind of not viable because of how expensive they are.
Yeah, even the bottom of the order now, I'm looking at it. Renfroe at 4,100, Kike at 4,200, Christian Vasquez at 4,200. You were not getting discounts really on anybody besides Danny Santana and Marwin Gonzalez. So honestly, might be more of a team to take a one-off from than I think load up on a full stack or, maybe mini stacks too. But it does seem overall like there could be some weird constructions here, but watch the ownership. I think if the ownership stays low, maybe it is a pay up to be contrarian for the full stack spot. And you could save on one of your pitchers. That could be one way to get there. Let's go next game. Washington, 3.3 implied runs going against Shane McClanahan. And McClanahan, one of those guys who's come out really strong to start the year with a 30% K rate, 2.9 xFIP, walking guys more than you'd like to see, a 1.24 whip and a 7% walk rate, but still, I think the rest of the numbers here looking pretty good. I feel like the BABIP seems like a little bit unlucky too, with a 340 batting average on balls in play allowed. But overall, McClanahan missing bats about as well as anybody out there. And I guess this could be one of those guys, Greg, where I don't know if there's any history in Tampa Bay, but do we know anything about Shane McClanahan's spin rate and the risk of that? Because he is missing bats at a rate, 18% swing strike rate, 37% chase rate. That would be as good as anybody on the slate.
I mean, look at his minor league numbers. It's not any different than what he did in the minor leagues. He's a 30.4% K rate in the minor leagues this year. I mean, 2019 in A-ball, 30.9% strikeout rate. The year before, 33.2, and then other ones just really small sample size. But he's always struck out a ton of guys in the minor leagues. I fall back on some of the Zips projections for him going forward, where they have him striking out, double-digit hitters per 9 innings. So everything points towards him being a guy who's going to generate a lot of swing and misses. It matches the eye test, too. If you look at his average fastball velocity so far this year, 97.5 miles per hour. He clearly has really good stuff. I don't think that he's right off the bat one of the top overall pitchers in baseball or anything like that, but, well-regarded prospect. He's found some success so far. And if we're looking at this slate and trying to find ways to differentiate from Garrett Cole, at some point I have to find some pitchers I like. And McClanahan, projecting for only single-digit ownership, I like the upside that he brings in tournaments.
And Washington overall has had less power against left-handed pitching on the year with a 142 ISO, though. The projected lineup they have today does have a 190 ISO overall against left-hand pitching since 2019, but I'm getting less results, striking out at league average. I'm with you. I think the 9% ownership for McClanahan, I could come in a little bit above that, I think. And I'd be curious, his pitch count, what it was in last game, because he's only thrown 69 per appearance so far, but I know he was throwing a little bit shorter earlier, so I'm just curious if you had that in front of you.
It'll take me like 5 seconds to bring it up. But also, this is a slate where for pitching, even though it's a 12-game slate, I think with somebody because Garrett Cole is picking up so much of the ownership today, and I'm taking a stand where I would like to have less of Garrett Cole and just try and find some of the other guys I like. It's a little hard. So just anybody with strikeout upside, like McClanahan, by the way, 79 pitches in his last start. So
okay,
not a ton. Although we also struggled in that start. It was against the Yankees. He only pitched 3 1/3 innings, gave up 4 runs. So, 3 1/3 innings, 79 pitches. Maybe if he was going better, it would have been in the neighborhood of like 85 to 90. So he's not going to be pitching, he's not going to be throwing 100 plus pitches or anything like that. But, I think if we get 5 or 6 innings out of McClanahan with his strikeout stuff, that could be 7 or 8 strikeouts. And I think that makes him comparable to some of the other pitchers on the slate.
I do think, too, Washington stacks seem not the highest probability situation at all. 1.3% chance of being a top stack today with 1% ownership. But the 1% ownership is the thing that intrigues me here, where I do like McClanahan. I think I'm impressed by McClanahan's stuff so far. Like the swing strike rate, chase rate do seem like numbers that should lead to pretty big strikeout results throughout the year. But McClanahan still being a young pitcher who's getting hit fairly hard, a 9% barreled ball rate. I feel like I'm kind of surprised to see this low of a total. I know the park is going to help out McClanahan a lot, but 3.3 implied runs, Greg, I feel like that's low. And despite that low total, I wouldn't mind taking a few stabs at Washington just because they look entirely unknown, I guess, besides Trey Turner, who still only under 5% ownership on DraftKings.
Yeah, it's still not a team I want to be on. I still believe in McClanahan. The Rays also have a good bullpen behind them. We only have Washington with a 1.3% chance of being the top stack of the day. So the only team with worse top stack odds than Washington is the Colorado Rockies. So with that in mind, Washington is not a team that I'm going to be getting to.
Okay. I'm more willing to take Flyers here because they look completely unknown on the slate, but yeah, definitely low probability chance here according to the top stacks. So also keep that in mind if you are a person like me who's willing to take on some risk for whatever sport you're playing. The Washington starting pitcher on the other side will be Patrick Corbin going against Tampa Bay, 4.2 implied runs for the Rays. And Corbin, we've talked about a few times on these shows, but the numbers get worse every time out. Down to an 18% K rate this year, 1.5 whip, walking guys at a 9% rate, 290 batting average allowed. It all looks pretty bad for Corbin. One thing he has going for him today, he's facing a Tampa Bay team that on the year strikes out at a 30% rate against left-hand pitching. And Corbin's swing strike rate and chase rate, not bad enough compared to his 2019 sample size that he was a 25% K rate guy if you go back that far, and it was around a 13% swing strike rate. This year's at 11.1%. And the velocity is flat too, 91.5 miles per hour to 91.5 miles per hour this year. Look, I don't mind taking stabs at Corbin. I do mind taking stabs at him, though, when he's going to be 17% owned, Greg. But, I feel like Corbin's still viable as a play at his price tag. And the fact that the Rays just seem to have a really tough time hitting lefties overall.
Yeah, but just given what his ownership is, I'm a little more inclined to get to the Rays side than I am to Patrick Corbin. Right now we have Corbin projected as the 5th most popular starting pitcher on the entire slate. And just given how much he struggled this year, 6.28 ERA, 6.33 expected ERA. He wasn't particularly good last year either, 4.66 ERA, 5.17 expected ERA. There's been a pretty significant drop off over the last couple of years. He's also over the age of 30, which could also be a sign of decline and be a potential reason for that. Surely the strikeout rate probably should go up a little bit, but it's still not to the point where I think that it would warrant him being nearly 20% owned. So to me, I'm not going to be on Corbin today, or if I am, it's going to be way under the field.
Yeah, I could still sort of justify getting closer to the field for myself just based on, the yearly results of Tampa Bay and the fact they do struggle with lefties. And I do still believe that Corbin's not quite as bad as he's been this year, though that could be me kind of carrying a torch for a guy I know that has been better historically. But certainly, watch the ownership here. If he ends up a chalkier play, I would agree it could be time to jump off. But at 17%, I would want to be there to some amount, even if it's not quite that 17% number. Tampa Bay hitters, though, we do have a bunch of guys who can hit lefties. Randy Rosarena has certainly been one who's had monster days against lefties on the year, 252 ISO for himself. And then you have Brandon Lau, who hits lefties better than you would think. You also have Brousseau, who hits lefties at a 243 clip. But any Rays hitters who really jump out for you, because these guys as well, much like the Washington side, look like entirely unknown besides Manuel Margot hitting in the leadoff spot.
Let's see. So guys that I'm getting to overweight to the field on the initial build that I've made. Taylor Walls, who, just because I guess he's cheap, shortstop eligibility, only picking up 0.5% ownership. I have him more than the field right now. Not that it's a hard number to get overweight to the field on. Mike Brousseau, you mentioned him. The only real concern I have, I always end up muting Brousseau's projection a little bit, or just nerfing it a little bit to bring it down, because he does end up popping up in a decent amount of lineups for me when they face left-handed pitcher, and he gets pinch hit for so often. And that's something that's really hard to account for in projections. But there's been so many days over the last couple of years where it's like, hey, I have a Rays stack and I'm really high on Mike Brousseau, and he goes 0 for 2 and then gets pinch hit in his third at bat. So I think Brousseau is somebody to get to, but just a little cautious of playing Rays stacks and having him in all of them.
I do like Brousseau because pretty much everybody else on the team draws walks and Brousseau doesn't. So I think you're going to have probably a higher probability of that home run outcome, or, the strikeout outcome, which obviously you're not wanting the strikeout side of it. But Corbin, I think, just bad enough that, 3,100 for Brousseau. I'm intrigued, but I think that you're right. It does come with a little bit of risk there, even though he does have great lefty results, can easily get pinch hit for. Let's do a quick shout out to PrizePicks, our sponsor, where if you are tired of dealing with all the ownership games and all that stuff that we talk about on here, sometimes it's fun when it's running in your favor. Sometimes it really can be owners for players out there just frustrated about running into the chalk plays over and over again and finding them be a disappointment. Play over at PrizePicks because it's the simplest fantasy game on the market. You can say goodbye to sharks, lineup optimizers, and mass multi-entry. All you have to do is pick 2, 3, 4, 5 players available on the board to go over or under their projected score. If you correctly select the 5-player lineup, you can net yourself with a 10x your entry fee from the NFL and NBA to esports and MLB. PrizePicks has it. You can combine your picks across all sports available. So download the mobile app in the App Store or on Google Play today and make your first deposit to get an instant deposit match up to $100 when you use the promo code Awesemo. It's one of the biggest deposit matches you will find across the industry. So go. If nothing else, take advantage of that over at PrizePicks with the promo code Awesemo. $100 deposit match. Simplified daily fantasy over at PrizePicks today. And genuinely check them out. I know a lot of people on these shows, a lot of people we talk to on Twitter and on YouTube chat, really just find the ownership stuff tough to manage. It definitely takes a bit of a callus to build for yourself mentally. So PrizePicks, I do think, simplifies it in a way that if I were out there and I were just somebody who's banging my head against the wall on Draftkings and Fanduel every day, I would give it a shot, because I think some people out there, if you enjoy the fantasy concept, maybe you're just not getting the results you want. PrizePicks can do it for you. So go check them out and use that promo code Awesemo. Got 7 more games left, so we're gonna make some good time in the back half. So hit that like button if you can, guys. Too, we appreciate that a bunch. Milwaukee 4.9 implied runs going against Vlad Gutierrez. Gutierrez has only faced 40 batters on the year. It's not the biggest sample size, but has a 15% K rate and a 5.9 xFIP, while not giving up a lot in the way of walks and hits. So it does seem like things should be getting worse according to the underlying numbers here for Vlad Gutierrez. And Milwaukee on the year, certainly a team that does not look good because they have been injured for a lot of the year with a 290 on base percentage, 155 ISO, 26% K rate against right-hand pitching. But Gutierrez, Greg, it just seems like a bad enough pitcher here where, I don't think I want to get so much Gutierrez. He did not show much in the way of swinging strikes or chase rate in his limited appearances so far. So that, to me, a guy that I don't mind disqualifying until he proves otherwise. But Milwaukee, too, a lot of ownership going to these guys, a lot of high ownership, it seems, 11.7% stack ownership compared to a 7.7% chance of being a top stack. So good park, good weather, it seems like today, humid and 76 degrees in Cincinnati, but it does seem like Milwaukee going to be really highly owned, targeting Vladimir Gutierrez, who's not good, but maybe decent at run prevention if his numbers do hold up better than it seems like they did in that first appearance.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, this is a really good spot for the Milwaukee Brewers. Just the question becomes the overall ownership, and is it a good enough spot where it warrants one of the worst offenses in baseball to be the most roster team on the slate by a pretty decent margin? We have them projected for 11.7% ownership, like you said, as a team. But we have them with, let's see, so it's 7.7% top stack odds. The next highest roster team right now is the Mets at 8.7%. So we're getting about 67% of the ownership on the Mets that's going to the Brewers. But the top stack odds, actually, the Mets have very slightly better odds of being a top stack, but it's comparable. So I just look at the Brewers as being a team that's picking up so much ownership that while it's a good spot for them, I don't want to get there. And they're the most negatively leveraged team we have right now in the top stacks tool. So the Brewers, if people say they really like the Brewers, I'm not going to disagree with you and say it's a bad spot. I just think there's too much ownership going to them. So this is a team that I think warrants being way light to relative to the field.
Yeah, I would think I'd prefer these guys more in one-off situations where you can hopefully try to capture some of that power in a good hitting situation overall against Gutierrez. But I agree, like it's a lot of ownership going to these guys, and Christian Yelich will be one of the chalkiest players on DraftKings today with around 25% ownership, and Omar Narvaez is not far behind either with around 20%. So keep that in mind if you are stacking up the Brewers, that you want to get some of those lower-owned guys, or you just maybe want to take those guys as one-offs instead. But definitely a lot of ownership going to the Brewers, and I'm with you. I think they do seem over-owned, and Gutierrez, not great, certainly, but I don't think quite as bad as to the point where you need to target him to this level. On the other side, we have Brett Anderson going against Cincinnati, who has 5.1 implied runs. Cincinnati's not been great on the year against left-hand pitching, only a 162 ISO and 293 on base percentage, but Anderson is so bad, a 12.7% K rate, doesn't miss bats at all, 5% swing strike rate this year, which is lower than his historical sample size of 7.4% since 2019. But Anderson, a bad pitcher for the most part. I don't get how he's 8,500 either. That has a baffling price tag going against Cincinnati, who strikes out just at league average against left-hand pitching. But Brad Anderson, not a guy I'm trying to play, Greg. And I do think Cincinnati's hitters looking much less owned than Milwaukee's side of things, though top stacks tool does have him looking a little bit over-owned overall.
Yeah, you know what's even more curious? Because I'm just so baffled by this Brett Anderson price tag. What do you think is the most fantasy points he's scored in the last month and a half?
12?
10.9. And his last start, by the way, he scored negative fantasy points in 2 of his last 4 starts and 3 of his last 6. But his last start, negative 0.3 fantasy points. And he's just really expensive. Even his last couple of starts, 8,400 to 8,700. So I don't know. There's something about this pricing algorithm that's like, hey, Brett Anderson's the guy for no reason whatsoever. Also, he is now 33 years old. He's also had a history of arm injuries. And you look at his velocity over the last few seasons. In 2019, 91.2. Last year, 89.9. This year's average fastball velocity is down to 89.3. He's a 4.42 ERA, but an 8.58 expected ERA, a 5.63 FIP. I think this is a good spot to get to the Reds. And yeah, that price tag on Brett Anderson is really confusing.
Yeah, I definitely won. Even the fact that he's projected for 0.5% ownership is kind of baffling in this spot. 0.1% feels more like the number that would come up normally. But yeah, Brett Anderson to me unplayable at 8,500, and frankly just baffling to see that price tag. The hitters though going against him, like Nick Castellanos, I think is a pretty strong one-off in this spot, a 318 ISO historically against lefties. But honestly, the Cincinnati lineup, Greg, is pretty bad. Like normally I wouldn't mind targeting Brett Anderson, but he does keep the ball down a 5.8 degree launch angle. The ball gets hit really hard, but it's a lot of hard hit ground balls, a 25% fly ball rate overall. I think to me, just taking stabs on one-offs would be the most appealing move, given the fact that this projected lineup, like you have 2 guys that hit over a 200 ISO, and then everybody else is under a 150. A lot of guys here around 100. Jonathan India, 107 ISO against lefties. Winker, a 103. Votto, 093. Scott Heineman, 0.125. Barnhart, 073. Like these are really bad power numbers. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about the Cincinnati hitters, but if they're going to score 5 runs, it feels like it has to come from Castellanos or Eugenio Suarez.
I mean, Jesse Winker's a really good hitter too. Even against left-handed pitching, Jesse Winker's found a lot of success this year. Also, Brett Anderson is a sinker ball pitcher, and Jesse Winker has been the best hitter in the league against sinkers this year. Jonathan India, while he was terrible to start the year, in his last handful of games, 10 fantasy points, 10, 25, 21, 9, and 2. So Jonathan India also is sitting in a better lineup spot now. He's moved up from the end of the order to now hitting leadoff for the Reds. So there are some individual plays here that I think makes sense, and I don't mind getting to more than the field. Jesse Winker, I'm not scared of the left-left matchup, given how good he's been this year. Castellanos is the one popular hitter, but then beyond that, I mean, Eugenio Suarez, he's also struggled this year, but he's a long history of being a really good hitter against left-handed pitching, so it wouldn't surprise me to see him hit a home run. The real concern I have here, actually, is one of the reasons I don't really like to stack against the Brewers is their bullpen is so good that if this is a remotely competitive game, when Brett Anderson comes out, they're going to be facing tough starting pitching. Tough relief pitching after the starting pitching. So the Reds, some of these individual hitters, I do actually like, but I guess I'm probably just going to end up being around even with the field on them.
Yeah, I just some of these guys like Winker, I get it, like the numbers for the year and over the last season, including the pandemic season, look great. But like going back to 2019, still only a 103 ISO, 216 batting average against lefties at 81 WRC plus. So like I think I get taking a stab on a guy who's been good, but I just see the longer term sample for a lot of these guys against lefties, and it just drives me more to Castellanos and to a lesser extent Suarez. But I get it. Like I get that these guys certainly can hit a little better, and Brett Anderson is such a bad lefty that definitely can wake up the best parts of lefty hitting. So I think that's a reasonable approach. Next game up, we got Seattle 4.2 implied runs against Casey Mize. Casey Mize starting to make some improvements overall, still not showing a lot in the way of strikeout rate. A 20.4% K rate, which is just a little bit up from the 20.1% K rate he's had since last season. 1.07 whip, though, showing some signs of life. And if there's anything you have going for Casey Mize today, it's a cheap price tag. And the fact he's facing Seattle, who we've seen give up A, no hitters multiple times, but B, just give up competent days to pitchers who sometimes aren't the most competent. And because of that, Greg, I feel like I have no issue taking stabs at Casey Mize. He's throwing about 90.5 pitches per appearance, and he's certainly not good, but neither is Seattle. So I think Casey Mize, this could be another spot at less than 10% ownership that I think he starts to show the improvement that we're starting to see really, I think, appearance after appearance.
Yeah, and I think the key here is, former number one overall pick in the draft. He's only 24 years old. He is an overall top prospect in baseball. Coming into the year, Fangraphs had him ranked as the 30th best prospect in baseball, one of the top overall pitching prospects. And even though his numbers for the year aren't good, they have improved pretty substantially over the last month, and his velocity is up. So his average fastball velocity up to 94.6. But here's his last handful of starts now from DraftKings fantasy points: 18, 21, 21, 20, and then 18 and a half last start. So with that in mind, he's somebody who struggled a lot to open the year, but he has a really, good acumen as a prospect. He's made improvements as the season has gone on, and he's getting fantasy results as of late. So I think there's reason to think that he should be trajecting upwards. So Casey Mize on a slate where I haven't found all that many pitching options I like, I'm willing to bet on the talent here and take stabs on him.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm kind of surprised to see, based on those recent results, maybe people not seeing enough strikeout upside there, because there is a lot of numbers around 20, but 7% ownership for Casey Mize on DK at his price tag, I think would be an absolute steal. And I would get, to me, 20% seems like a good number to get to if that's going to be the mark, but is one I think to watch throughout the day. The ownership just came out right before the show, so there's definitely possibilities that it could get some updates that drive him up a little bit. So I would watch that one, but I'm with you. I think Casey Mize is a strong play today, and one that I feel pretty decent about. On the other side, we have Chris Flexen going against Detroit, 4.8 implied runs for Detroit. And Flexen, it does seem like not a good pitcher, but the stack for Detroit does look like it'll be deeply overowned. A 4.3% chance of being a top stack, along with 7.7% chance, or 7% ownership, for Detroit today. And they do have a decent chance of being a top value stack on the day. So they are a team that's going to pop up easily on an optimizer, Greg. And I feel like because of that, as well as the fact that Flexen keeps the ball down pretty well, a 2.6% on run rate allowed this year, a 6% barrel ball rate. I don't love the Tigers, and I feel like I don't know why that's a controversial statement based on the slate ownership. Does seem like it will be. I don't love them, and I think really, if you want to take your shots and keep chasing Eric Haas, he's certainly been hitting for a lot of power. But besides that, I don't know how you could justify stacking up a lot of Tigers.
Yeah, I mean, we have the Tigers, the fourth most owned offense on the slate right now. That is pretty lofty for them. We do have them very negatively leveraged. They do have a really high chance of being a top value stack. But if I personally don't want to get to Garrett Cole all that much today, certainly not as much as the field, it really limits the interest to me in the Tigers, because I think the appeal to the Tigers is you roster them to have this cap space to easily spend up for Garrett Cole, but that's not really a desirable lineup construction for me. Chris Flexen, not particularly good, 4.7 ERA, 4.51, 4.04 FIP this year, 4.7 ERA, 4.51 expected ERA. But like you said, really high ground ball rate, 47%. I don't know if you remember this, but Chris Flexen for a while was just lights out in the minor leagues. And he got called up to the big leagues in 2018. And he made his first career start, or 2017. He made his first career start. It was against the Padres. And I remember he was min priced in like 65% on that start. And he just got absolutely crushed. And he just never ended up being good in the big leagues. But I remember his minor league stats. He was somebody with a really high strikeout rate and just always maintained ERAs like sub 2. And it never converted to the big league level. But yeah, I think either way, looking at the Tigers here, way overowned. I don't really have interest in them, and no interest in Flexen either.
Yeah, Flex has given up a 301 batting average this year, 293 since 2019. Definitely has not shown a whole lot. So, I think he could certainly give up some hits, but I think they're going to be a little more in the line, along the lines of ground balls and balls in play. And that's not the spot I would want to be for a very highly owned stack. Next game up, we got Colorado and Miami. This one, we don't know the starting pitching, I think, quite yet for Miami, though I believe it's going to be Braxton Garrett for them, but keep your eye for that one because we don't have a total for it either. And it's always tough to talk about the games where we don't know the pitching, Greg, or the Vegas total for it. But in the spot, if Braxton Garrett's the pitcher, he's not been very good overall so far. Only faced 13 batters this year, 47 since last year, but a 21.3% strikeout rate since last year, 15.4% this year. So that's getting even worse. But overall, Braxton Garrett, I guess at the price tag, maybe you can justify getting there. He's only thrown 51 pitches per appearance so far this year, so not a high pitch count. But you have any thoughts on Garrett or Colorado? I feel like I wouldn't mind stacking Colorado, but and I don't know for sure if it is Garrett starting. So if you know anything more about that than I do, feel free to throw that in too.
Yeah, no confirmed starter right now. As for Braxton Garrett, just a non-prospect organizational guy in the Marlins organization. We've seen him pitch, like you said, a total of 3 innings this year. He's given up 3 runs in those innings. It's really hard to take away too much from that. I just feel like we need more information here to know who's actually starting for the Marlins, because I don't know if it's actually going to be Garrett. I don't know if he's going to be allowed to work deep into the game. If it is him, he does kind of stink. But at a 4,000 price tag, I think that would be okay to take a couple of stabs on if he is actually the starting pitcher and isn't just going to be an opener.
The other side, we'll have Austin Gomber going against Miami. Again, no total for this spot either, but it does look like Gomber will project as one of the highest owned players on the slate today. And he's been good. I mean, a 25% K rate on the year, 1.14 whip, doing this while pitching some of the time in Colorado. I think pretty impressive. The fact this game is in Miami with the roof closed as well. Gomber, to me, I don't know that I want to be there 35% of the time, Greg, but he has been good enough in facing a Miami team that strikes out at a 28% clip, gets left-hand pitching on the year. I think Gomber is a solid play again, and I'm sure at some point this is going to blow up and there's going to be a bad day, but I don't know if against Miami with the roof closed on that 6K on Draftkings is going to be the day where the Austin Gomber bottom falls out. Yeah,
it's hard to not be on him just because it is a good matchup, and he's pitched fine this year, especially when you consider he's making half his starts at Coors Field. He's a 4.12 ERA, a 3.51 expected ERA, and he's too cheap. Just the price tag is wrong. I think that if he was more expensive, we'd have something to talk about. If he was 8,500 and Brett Anderson was 6,000, like that would be more appropriate pricing. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that given the success that Gomber's had this year, that he should be 6K. I think that it makes sense to have him in somewhere around, a third of your lineups or something like that. But I just wish he was less owned because I think he's pretty clearly the best value pitcher on the slate. And overall, if you're just looking at all the price tags of all the pitchers, he's the guy that I prioritize the most. It's just, he's really popular. I'll probably be somewhere around even with the field on him.
Yeah, I think that's the approach that I would want as well. Just too cheap of a price tag is really the main thing here. A 3-run shot in the YouTube chat saying that Miami has some bats that could hit left-hand pitching. I would say overall that there are a few guys like Jazz Chisholm hits lefties a little bit better. Garrett Cooper, Adam Duvall. Duvall's had a lot of pop against lefties, though. I keep picking him against lefty pitching to hit a home run, and that has not worked out once this year as far as I can recall. But Greg, I have no issue stacking Miami too, given the high ownership on Gomber. I just think the Gomber part of the equation has a higher likelihood of coming through.
I mean, these guys are still expensive, though. We have even Duvall, your staple home run pick. He's 4,100 today. We've got Starling Marte 4,900. Chisenholm is also 4,900. So if you're stacking the core guys here, they're pretty expensive. There's not that much ownership going to them, and you are getting leverage. But we have them with really low top stack odds. We have them at a 2.1% chance of being top stack on the slate. I think there's better spots to get to. I'm much more apt to get to the Austin Gomber side.
All right, let's keep it going here. Now let's try to speed it up for our end too, Greg, because we've been luxuriating too much in this 12-game slate. Apparently, Yankees 4.8 implied runs against Randy Dobnak. Dobnak, another pitcher who I wouldn't mind just taking out of consideration right away. Throwing 47.7 pitches per appearance so far this year, 15.5% strikeout rate, not the best, but he is keeping the ball down fairly well as well. Not a great bullpen behind him. To give the Twins bullpen 3.7% on run rate's a pretty decent mark, but I think to me, Dobnak pitching about 3 innings per appearance. I don't expect the Yankees to get a lot of results against them, and they're going to be owned pretty decently, though looks like a little bit under-owned according to the top stacks tool. But Greg, give me your thoughts of the Yankees against Dobnak, and I guess if you want to chime in any support for Dobnak, feel free.
Yeah, no support for Randy Dobnak for me. I do like a man who wears rec specs when he pitches, but beyond that, the Yankees offense, they are starting to get a little bit healthier now, and we do actually have them with, as far as the more expensive teams go, we do have them the second best chance of being a top value stack on the slate. The Yankees offense has been, so underwhelming this year, but now we've got Giancarlo Stanton back in the mix. They're finally starting to get healthier. Some of these guys, Stanton, Gleyber Torres, DJ LeMahieu, there's enough track record on some of these guys that I think they should start to see an uptick in their performance. And just given that some of the favorable pricing we have for the Yankees here, I don't mind taking shots at them today.
And the Twins on the other side getting 3.7 implied runs against Garrett Cole. We've talked a lot about the Garrett Cole spin rate controversy that's been going on throughout the course of the year. But if he is not getting spin against a Minnesota team in this situation where 91-degree weather in Minnesota today, decently humid as well at 40%, and Minnesota certainly has the power, 178 ISO on the year against right-hand pitching. This projected lineup today, I've had a 186 ISO overall against righties. Decent spot if Garrett Cole, if you are not a believer in him and his ability, I guess, to get results without that spin rate being enhanced by whatever substances, Greg. And I think to me, though, with Garrett Cole ownership, I feel like if you were with the 36% chance of being a top pitcher, that to me seems more logical than the field's 48% ownership with the risk profile that we've talked about, I think, enough throughout the show. But Cole, tell me where you're landing with him in terms of the ownership target that you're trying to hit. And I guess your Twins interest too, because I'm with you that stacking against the Twins today, I think a shot you have to take.
Yeah, so in the initial build I have 5% twin stacks, which is way more than the field has. We currently have the field rostering the Twins at less than 1%. So, I mean, I'm looking to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 6x the field on the Twins. And then as for Garrett Cole, I have him in about 20% of my lineups now. So that is about 20% of what the field has, because the field has him in about half the lineups right now. So I'm not totally comfortable just saying I'm getting 0% of Garrett Cole, but I'm going way underweight to the field on him. I know I'm taking a little bit of a shot in the dark because, I mean, we're just looking at spin rate and I'm looking at, some interviews and some other, weird circumstances. And a lot of it just kind of an intuition, a gut feeling. But I just think going forward, Garrett Cole is not going to be the same quality of starting pitcher that he has been over the last couple of years, because I think that he's been so reliant on that uptick in his spin rate to make some of his off-speed pitches work in combination with already what is an excellent fastball. And the fastball is still going to be there, right? He's still one of the hardest throwing pitchers in baseball, but I really do worry about how effective some of his other pitches are going to be, given that it seems like he's going to be playing with less than advantage now. And that would certainly bear itself out when he gave up 5 runs in his last start, and there was a pretty significant drop-off in spin rate. I think it's reasonable to look at some of his career numbers from earlier when he was with the Pittsburgh Pirates, where he was still a quality starting pitcher. He just wasn't a Cy Young caliber starting pitcher. So we're looking at a guy who's, maybe more like a second starting pitcher in a rotation going forward. I think that's a possibility with Garrett Cole. And he's just going so highly owned today and nobody's on the Twins that I think it's something I'd like to be out ahead of. I have futures on some other bets to win Cy Youngs this year. I have Carlos Rodon at this point. I have him at 70-1. I have Tyler Glasnow. I bet him at 6-1 yesterday. So I think there's other ways also from a betting perspective that we could fade Garrett Cole going forward.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting way to look at it. And something that would occur with me with Cole too is that he attacks up in the zone so much where if he's not getting a good spin rate, like he could definitely be taken advantage of. And now something where there was that chalk day against Texas a couple weeks back where I think he still actually was doing whatever he was doing to the balls. And in that one still, he was like leaving a lot of pitches up and they just kept taking him deep over and over again. And not that that's the case, but he does have a 13-degree launch angle overall in the year. And I think, if you see him be a little bit less effective, if he does hang those pitches up, especially against Minnesota, they have enough guys who could drive that out pretty easily. So yeah, I think a Minnesota stack, whether it be the full stack or mini ones, definitely an appealing choice to go to today in your lineups without Cole. Next game up, we got Toronto, 3.6 implied runs against Lance Lynn. And Lance Lynn, a guy on the year, 27% K rate. I think he always looks decent when he is an alternative to stud pitching that you can have the highest faith in. 10.4 price tag on DraftKings, or $10,400 price tag. Not the most appealing to me. I think the field's 20% ownership feels about right, maybe a little bit higher based on the top pitchers tool. But Greg, give me your thoughts about Lance Lynn in a spot where you're taking on a little bit of risk going against Toronto, and Lynn too, another guy who does allow a pretty good launch angle at 20 degrees, but he's been solid enough. And I think if you're not going to Cole, I see no issue going to Lance Lynn.
Yeah, just by default, I end up on Lance Lynn because if I'm trying to lower my exposure to Garrett Cole relative to the field, at some point I have to be overweight to somebody, especially in the high price range. And he's the only other expensive starting pitcher on the slate. So Lance Lynn, 10,400. I'm overweight to the field on him now, while going underweight to the field by Garrett Cole. And that's really what I'm looking at here. Is a lot of it is who do I think is going to score more fantasy points, Garrett Cole or Lance Lynn? And relative to ownership, I'm going to be siding with Lynn.
And it does seem like our producer Tyler says that Lance Lynn's going to win the AL Cy Young this year. So if you want to place a futures bet based upon a man who you see on camera, I think once a year, who but does occasionally provide very quality accents, feel free. And again, sometimes he's also in the nude when he's broadcasting for us, and I think that's helpful to know for the credibility of the man you're taking a bet from. But Lance Lynn, certainly, if you see Cole come down, Lance Lynn can be one of those guys that does benefit. Toronto hitters, though, I still don't mind taking stabs at, given the fact that Lynn, 48% fly ball rate, that high launch angle. I feel like if if Lynn runs bad here, there's a pathway for Toronto to take advantage in a park that does play better for power and decent humidity today. Not the hottest day, though. 72-degree weather, 77% humidity for the Chicago White Sox park. But overall, I feel like Toronto, 3.6 implied runs. I wouldn't mind getting a little bit here, given the fact, Greg, that looks like they won't be owned at all.
Yeah, I don't like stacking against Lance Lynn. He's been so solid for the year, 1.23 ERA, a 2.64 expected ERA. Last year, he was also really good, 3.32 ERA, 3.28 expected ERA. So 12-game slate, there's a lot of teams to choose from. In just the interest of time, I don't think the Blue Jays should be a priority. If you want to get to one or two of them just for ownership reasons, that's fine. Except to me, I much prefer the Lynn side.
The other side, we're going to have Alek Manoah going again, and his price tag is up to an egregious level, 9,700 on DK. Does have a 30% K rate for himself on the year and has been a good strikeout guy going back to the minors, which we talked about when he made his debut or was supposed to make his debut. Then it got postponed. Then he had a great debut. Second game, not quite as good. Has faced 40 batters on the year, up to a 7.5% on run rate, a 14% barreled ball rate, 17-degree launch angle, also not good. And Manoah at this price tag, Greg, I think he's a guy that in good matchups, I have no problem going there, especially if he's going to be a little bit cheaper moving forward, but he's priced like a stud, and I don't think he's quite a stud yet. And I think this spot comes a lot of dangerous power for him. So to me, I think Manoah play going to be 0.5% owned, maybe a tournament option to get above that. But I feel like if you have more than 5%, it could be a pretty big risk here for Manoah.
Yeah, I just don't get why he's 9,700. So, I mean, as an alternative to Garrett Cole at 0.5% ownership, I agree. That's a fine number to get overweight to the field on based on his strikeout stuff. But that's a really hefty price to pay for a guy who has basically no track record. So the price is just wrong here.
And given the fact that people have been able to tee off on him with that 14% barrel ball rate and launch angle, I think the White Sox stack to me looks worth some exposure. Only a 3% chance of being a top stack today, 1.7% ownership. And I think this is one of those volatility situations where I don't mind getting bits of both. And 4.5 implied runs for the White Sox, Greg. I feel like on this slate, a team unowned with a decent implied total against a pitcher who's been known to give up some power in his limited sample size, I feel like plays pretty well for me. But how do you feel about the White Sox hitters?
So the White Sox hitters, it's still, so for what we've seen from Manoah, at least his minor league numbers, they're really strong. We haven't seen very much from him at the major leagues, only 9 innings so far this year. But so I lean a little bit on the Zips and Steamer projections. They do have him projected to be a slightly above average league pitcher. So with that in mind, the Chicago White Sox, it's not a team I'm going to be prioritizing all that much. There's other stacks I prefer to get to. We only have them with a 3% top stack odds. So other teams I'd rather roster today.
Yeah, I feel like the one thing that jumps out from his limited sample size so far, the 545 ISO allowed to lefties compared to 131 to righties. And I think you do have some competent lefties here like Adam Eaton. I think the price tag, not a bad play. Yohan Moncada, you are paying a steeper price tag for him, but certainly has gotten results against right-handed pitching over the course of time, the 211 ISO and a 4% on run rate. And to me, there are some ways you can go to here. Grandal as well, a catcher. I'm a little more intrigued by the hitting here, but I certainly get Manoah has been a good pitcher so far, and definitely in the minors also had good results. Last two games. So hit that like button if you can, guys. We appreciate it a bunch. We're going to try to get through these as fast as we can. Cleveland, 3.5 implied runs going against Adam Wainwright. Wainwright, one of those pitchers I don't mind getting to sometimes on shorter slates, but at 9,500 with a 21.6% K rate on the year, Greg, I feel like the pitch count's fine, but going against Cleveland is not a high strikeout rate team. I don't think I'd want a ton of Adam Wainwright today, but how do you feel about him at 10% expected ownership on DraftKings?
Yeah, I don't understand the price tag on him either. He hasn't pitched poorly this year, but he hasn't been that good either. The strikeout rate is fairly low, 4.19 ERA, 3.91 expected ERA. He's a fine quality middle of the rotation starting pitcher, but not somebody who warrants being 9,500. And he is picking up double-digit ownership also. So the way I look at this, no real interest in Wainwright, but he's just solid enough where I don't have interest in the Indians either.
Yep, I think that's a reasonable way to look at it for me too. Giancarlos Mejia going on the other side against St. Louis, 4 implied runs for the Cardinals in the spot. And Mejia, not the biggest sample size in the majors, but has had a 0.5 whip and a 2.5 xFIP and 27 batters faced, but is probably more of a glorified opener / a relief guy. So probably not a guy who should be playing on the slate. And the Cardinals too, it does seem like not terrible hitting weather in their park relative to what it is, a 83-degree day, 68% humidity. But I don't really love the Cardinals either. I don't have enough of a feel for Mejia if I want to really target him, but he's really been getting in his limited run here, 27 batters face, a negative 5.9 degree launch angle means that he's getting guys to get low in that zone. So to me, I don't know that I have the highest faith in the Cardinals or Mejia.
Yeah, and with Mejia also, like you said, he's made 4 appearances this year and thrown a total of 8 innings. It's really hard for me to think that he works deep into the game at all. So to me, I'm not going to be on the Cardinal side. I'm not going to be on Mejia either. So both sides of this game kind of similar. No interest in pitching or the offenses.
Yeah, and a good Cleveland bullpen behind Mejia, too, with a 27.5% carried on the year, only allowing a 218 batting average and a 3.8 xFIP. So worth keeping that in mind, too. Last game on the slate, the Royals getting 4 implied runs against Griffin Canning. Chalk Griffin Canning days have been not great for some of the field recently, but on the year, 26% carried, a 1.5 whip means that he is walking guys too much, a 10.5% walk rate for him on the year. Also giving up a lot of power with a 6% on run rate, and he's facing a Royals team that doesn't strike out a lot, a 22.5% carry rate for them. And Griffin Canning going to be 17% owned. And I get people chasing the strikeout upside, but I think, Greg, I'd be more inclined to take the Royals side here. Canning gets hit pretty hard. The Royals don't strike out a lot. They get on base a decent amount. I feel like they can drag to stay out for Griffin Canning in a way that I think comes with a lot of risk for Canning at an $8,400 price tag. And I think does come with some upside for the Royals stack.
Yeah, I agree with that. If Canning was less popular, then I think that he'd be worth chasing the strikeout upside on. But, we've talked about some other guys in this price range, in particular, Shane McClanahan, who's picking up less than half the ownership that Griffin Canning is. I think there's more strikeout upside in McClanahan. So I think there's pivots in this price range. The Royals is a stack for leverage purposes. I don't think that's a bad spot to go to. We do have them as one of the most positively leveraged team on the slate, 4.3% top stack odds and only 1.6% ownership. So Griffin Canning this year, 5.16 ERA and 5.82 ERA, 4.51 expected ERA. They're not great numbers. Like you said, he's going for a lot of hard contact. So the Royals do look like a good contrarian stack that also offer leverage.
On the other side, we have Brad Keller going against the Angels. 5 implied runs for the Angels going against Keller. Keller, one of those guys we talked about a lot on here, really keeps that ball down very well. Low launch angle, 7.3 degree launch angle, a 300 batting average, but a lot of those are going to be batting average on balls in play with a 350 batting average and a 1.7 whip. But Keller, to me, a pitcher that I don't want to get to very much. The field, 2.6% projected ownership. That seems like more than enough for him. Even though Keller's had some decent days recently, I don't necessarily see one coming against the Angels. But another guy, Greg, who I feel like should be a decent enough pitcher here where maybe there are some room for Angel stacks, given the fact they look a little bit underowned according to the top stacks tool. But I just don't see them getting great results against Brad Keller, given just what he does is keep that ball down. So maybe a lot of singles for the Angels today, but it does feel like a full stack maybe going to have a tough time getting there.
Yeah, relative to ownership, though, I still don't mind a top stack. We've seen Justin Upton hit the ball better as of late. He's only picking up 2% projected ownership. Ohtani, he's only projected for 2% projected ownership. Rendon, the highest projected hitter in terms of ownership at 6%. So just because the numbers are so low here, they are players that I like getting overweight to the field on.
All right, so that covers it out here. And we do have 2 shows coming up later today. We have the MLB Deeper Dive and then the MLB Live Before Lock show. So all of you guys have been clamoring for the return of a full MLB schedule. You get it today. Those shows will be coming up at 5 p.m. Eastern. So 2 p.m. Pacific time will be the Deeper Dive with Aton, Alex, and Max. And that'll be me and Petey Mac, my first show with him today at 6 p.m. Eastern for the MLB Live Before Lock show. Greg, what are your plugs for yourself? Obviously, people should be following you by now at Ehrenberg Dfs.
So I'm going to be doing a monkey knife fight show, maybe by myself, maybe with Eric Lindquist, though he's apparently having some plane issues right now. He was on. I don't know if you're privy to that thread, but yeah. So Eric, who was away for his bachelor party, he was flying somewhere. His plane had to make an emergency landing, so he is. Like we always make fun of him that he does shows from the Holiday, and now he's actually going to have to do shows from Holiday Inn for tonight. So
we'll see. Me and Kayla doing the tip off. Me, Kayla, and a puppet doing the tip off.
I've offered to do the Monkey Knife Fight show by myself. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. And then I'm also going to be doing NBA Live Before Lock tonight.
Yeah, so I'll be on the tip-off at 4 p.m. Eastern, then I'll be doing the Live Before Lock show at 6 p.m. Eastern, so watch both of those. Of course, we have content going on the channel all day long, so make sure to like and subscribe to the channel here. Use that promo code MLB Strategy Show at Awesemo.com/join if you want to save 15% off your first week of Awesemo Plus, and then make sure to check out the Awesemo Podcast Network as well at Awesemo.com/podcast. This show, all of our longer shelf life shows, those are all available for you on the Podcast Network, and you do get your best chance to win an Awesemo Plus giveaway by leaving 5 stars and a review along with your Twitter handle or your email address on the reviews on there, because that is basically a thing we're giving away every single Friday. 1 free weekly membership goes out to the people reviewing positively on the podcast. Go check that stuff out. We appreciate you guys for being here and enjoy the rest of your days and come back for everything else later on. Good luck.